Well, a good morning and a hello and a warm welcome to everyone joining us today for this LinkedIn Live. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Adam Bastock, founder of People Planet Pint and founder of Small 99. It's great to see you. Thanks for coming and thanks for joining us today, Adam.
Thanks for having me.
So, Adam, today we've got a few questions for you. We'd love to hear more about People Planet Pint. We'd love to hear more about the work that you're doing in sustainability. And especially, I think probably the audience will be most interested in that idea around awareness to action, around engagement, around how you actually get people to do something by engaging with them and talking with them, and by, in your case, a lot of the time having discussions with them in the pub.
Yeah.
So we'd love to dig into that, and I think that'd be really valuable for people who are joining. But I think to kick us off, it'd be really interesting just for listeners who haven't come across People Planet Pint before, if you could just give us an outline of what it is and why it exists.
Yes. So People Planet Pint really is where it came from. Is that it was during COP26. I was in Glasgow at the time. I was visiting a lot of events, but there wasn't really a casual space for me to go and have a conversation. And that's the theme that stayed with it throughout. Is that I found that a lot of the sustainability events I was going to were really interesting, but they were panel sessions where you would hear from 4 people, but you've got a room full of 200 to 300 people from around the world that you're sat next to that you just never get to speak to. And I was like, okay, what if we just went to the pub after the event and had a chat? So I put a thing on LinkedIn, did an email out or whatever, and got about 40 people there who just turned up, and I was like, oh, okay, that was sort of weirdly easy because I hadn't been doing, I was new to the city, I was new to the sector, I was doing digital marketing beforehand, I didn't know anyone in sustainability necessarily, and I was like, okay, well, that worked. And then it sort of paused a little bit because there's a lot of COVID stuff still going on, and then we restarted it, but with that same intention of actually there was just a lack of casual space for sustainability conversations, and there was nowhere that I felt like I could go just to meet other people who were like-minded. I wanted to create that space that wasn't driving with an intentional impact, didn't really have an outcome. It was just go to the pub, chat to people, find kind of like-minded people, come and realize that there's more people in the city that actually do care about sustainability, but that probably don't feel like they're comfortable going to either meetups from like Greenpeace or XR or protests because they can feel a bit too political or a bit alienating. So really wanted to provide that casual space that is a neutral zone for people to come and just chat and realize that there's a lot more going on than they might realize.
And do you think those casual spaces, though, meeting in the pub and talking through these things, is it more networking? Is it more community building? And do you think that the conversations that people have in those sort of spaces get more interesting conversations than perhaps those formal, the panel sessions you were talking about before?
I think, I'm obviously biased on that, but I think slightly yes, purely from a numbers game. So if you think of it purely from the amount of conversations that you can have in a pub when you're all standing up in a room versus in a room with panels where it's only really the people next to you that you can speak to, and then after the end of it, everyone leaves. So the way you sort of think of it is creative collisions of the amount of people that you might be able to meet through just casually walking in. You don't know who you're going to meet, and that's why it's not really networking, I don't think, because we've always resisted the calls for like giving out guest lists before people attend or whatever, because then you end up leading towards more of a sales sort of pitch. And it's not that. It is like, no, just come along. You might meet someone who's a really senior executive at a massive, Fortune 500 type company, or you might come along and meet a student who's just walked out of university and is looking for their career path. And do you know what? You might be in a conversation with both of those people at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's what we've seen. And there's definitely events I've been to. There's a great venue we've got in London that we go to called Thamesis Dock, which is like on a boat just right opposite Parliament. And that's a really cool venue where I've walked in on people there, and you meet just the really highly influential people and people who are completely new to the industry, or people who have just gone, do you know what? I'm a software engineer and I'm sort of curious about sustainability, and I just wanted to pop along and learn a bit more. And that's sort of where the magic happens, and where I think you don't get that at events like panel sessions, which typically happen during the daytime. Yeah. So, when that is working hours, if you're that you're that engineer with a curiosity.
Yeah, you can't have the time. Yeah.
Yeah. You're making that argument to go and say, can I spend an hour at spend a day at this conference that's completely unrelated to my job? Is unlikely to be possible.
Yeah, and you talk about kind of senior execs coming from Fortune 500 companies, but I suspect in a pub setting where it's a lot more informal, there might be things comments they would make and suggestions or conversations they'd have which they couldn't have in the workplace. They couldn't have in the boardroom.
Totally. It's much more candid, and I think it has been trying to create that sort of feeling of safety without it being overt, because I think that the overtness can then put people on edge almost. So yeah, I think that has worked really well in those honest conversations, and it was always again, come and just tell us why you're pissed off, tell us why your work's been rubbish today and why you're like really frustrated, because again, you might not have space for that. You might have a WhatsApp group that you're in as a sustainability manager, but you don't want to have it in writing. Whereas if you're just coming to the pub and chatting about it, that can be a little bit more liberating, because it's not we don't record conversations. We're not miking up everybody. But yeah,
I'm sure it acts as a bit of a safety valve in that way, because as many of the sustainability managers I know, it's a hard slog. It's difficult pushing sustainability within organizations. Banging head against the wall a lot of the time, budget constraints. So I imagine going to a safe space where you can talk about the problems you're having, judgment free, I think is probably very welcome.
Totally, and I think that's why we really designed. From my point of view, I was also like, it's very important that this is in pubs. It is in a space that feels quite neutral. It's in a space that they might be a local that they go to, and therefore they feel more comfortable to have those difficult conversations. Whereas if you're doing it in like a co-working space, for example, it's much easier. It's much harder to get out and get in. Like you can't necessarily leave quite as easily as if it is in a pub, and there is sort of a perception there of kind of the environment that doesn't make you feel quite as relaxed as being in the corner of a cozy pub with a pint in your hand.
And then how do you pick the pub? I mean, my understanding is a network of individuals who host these events. How do you pick hosts and venues?
Yeah, so the venues is always down to the hosts. We don't have, we have guidance and top tips of picking a good venue. So making sure it's got soft furnishings is like one of those small things that if you walk in and it's metal and flat surfaces everywhere, I'm like, it's not the right pub, because as soon as you get 10 people talking, you can't hear each other.
Yeah.
So there's small sort of design considerations like that that we do try and train sort of hosts on. But no, the hosts, as you say, it's through volunteers. So we have 4 intakes a year, sort of every quarter, where we go become a host, come and learn more. We host a webinar where we lay out the sort of expectations, what people would like to see, what we like to see, what our sort of aims are, what we're trying to achieve, and then from there they can sort of apply. And some people say it's not right for them at that time. Some people then want to get ahead and get started really quickly, and then we do like a training session afterwards that is just giving them space to ask questions, because it's fairly, I think it's fairly hands off. We're just trying to provide as much support to hosts on how to get as many people into the pub as possible, because that's always the hardest bit, is getting that sort of traction. Despite it being sort of fairly a well-known brand within the space, it's still got a long way to go. So
I'm sure the first one must be the hardest, right? And you're building up a bit of momentum, it makes it easier.
It's really interesting. The second one is actually always the hardest.
Okay.
The first one people get really excited by, and they put loads of effort into it.
Right.
So they're like, "Oh my god, I'm a new host!" And then you go around and message everybody that you get everyone involved. You message all the different boards and stuff you've got locally. And it's the second one. You're like, "Well, that's great. That really worked. People are going to come back." And then you might get like 40 people to the first one, then 10 people turn to the second one.
Right.
Like,
That's really interesting.
That's a bit deflating. And then you sort of have to build up from there. But that's all part of the expectations that we do on the training, is like, look, this is what's probably going to happen.
Yeah, I'm sure that's some valuable insight for them to take away. Yeah, fantastic. And then it's gone international now as well, so I noticed that.
Yeah, so we've had quite a few in Australia. They're probably the sort of earliest adopters. We had an event in Singapore for a while. We've got some in India coming online. South Africa's just kicked off, and then we've got quite a few in Europe. And we did have Chicago for a while, but I think that then sort of died down a while back.
Global reach, that's very impressive. Good stuff.
Yeah, good man.
But it's not just People Planet Pint. You've also, I think, people dialing in might also be interested in the Small 99 Action Box.
Yeah.
And that's a a physical workshop that you run, and is that right?
Yeah, so where it came from, actually forgot I had
Got one.
a
Perfect.
demonstration. Here we are, available on the website right now.
Lovely.
It was one of those things where I spent, so my sort of background when I first started into the space was doing a lot of workshops and training with like local councils, local authorities, doing practical guidance for SMEs, because I was like, look, the other side of it, as I was coming into the space, having worked with small businesses for years, and was just quite frustrated by all of the knowledge that I was hearing at things like COP were aimed at large corporates. Now, okay, large corporates have got that, you know, the scale they need to act, but I was like, the speed is actually in SMEs. So if we're truly in a race to net zero, how do we mobilize the 5.5 million small businesses in the UK to start driving that and win that race? And so that was always sort of the mission and the vision, and started working towards that with, doing a lot of practical training courses to take very complex ideas and make it very simple for businesses. That was traditionally through me standing at the front of the room with the slide deck, doing 8 hours of training that way, which, I enjoyed. I'm not sure the people in the room necessarily enjoyed it, but also got to a point of going, do you know what, there's a lot of knowledge that is in my head that other people could use. Like, how do we scale that knowledge and scale that sort of impact? So that's where the action box kind of came from, where it's then got like a playbook of how to use it. I won't do a full pitch on this, but just as an example of the way we do it, like we've got the action cards, and then the reason why I wanted to mention it is that on the back of those cards we've then got different facts, and those facts and figures are things that I learned from those 3 years of doing all these workshops and going, do you know what, let's just put that into a pack of cards that then anyone can pick up and use. So the idea is that you can buy that off the website. There's a playbook on how to run the session, and then you can just go and run it with whoever you need to. That might be a local school board of governors where you're trying to decarbonize the school estate. It might be that you're running like carbon literacy training or climate fresks, and you want something as like an add-on or a precursor to that. And there's a bit of an icebreaker game in there as well, because there's a lot of myths and sort of misconceptions that we were hearing in that training, but it was really a way to document everything we'd learned from kind of 3 years of really spending a lot of time doing a lot of work building online tools. And it's not just training we did. We also built an online carbon reduction platform, and we also built a measure platform as well, so like a carbon footprinting tool, all of which sort of was wrapped up and digested into that action box. But
nice, that's fun. And when people are using that action box, what is it which you think generates the most interest and excitement from the participants?
I think it's a really interesting one, where as soon as you hand someone a piece of paper that's colourful, they start smiling. And I think there's a real piece there around that's how we've seen the engagement work. And the main feedback we got from it was that the game side of it was what was working. So at the start, the game we play, higher or lower, where it's 10 cards, everything from like a pension to a beef burger to a flight, where you have to put them in order from lowest to highest of the carbon emissions. Not particularly unique, not particularly new in terms of the data that's out there, but it's amazing how many people still get that wrong and put flights quite low. And that generates a lot of discussion. So that is a good icebreaker in terms of it gets people thinking, it gets people challenging their conceptions or their preconceptions about what they're working on and what actions they can take, which sets them up for the afternoon session the following session around taking action and going, well, actually, if we've just discovered that it's the fleet vehicles, which is the main emissions, how do we then start decarbonizing those? So I think that's what's created the most engagement, in that people always want to play the games and do more of that, and actually getting them to go from that to the action is quite often the hard part.
I think that's interesting. I think it's that gamification is the classic technique, isn't it? And I think that it's that in printed form, in physical form. So that can only be a winner.
Totally. And I think that's why we ended up doing like the pub mini game as well, which was a sort of a decent hit of like taking a lot of those actions that you'd find in a pub, so like a pint of ale versus a bottle of wine versus a hand dryer versus a patio heater, and just getting people to think about like the sort of material world around them in a bit more detail.
That's fantastic. Very good. And then thinking about that a little bit more, thinking about motivation and what motivates people to make they listen to the workshops, or they do the online training, they do the action in the box. what then do you think motivates someone to take in all that information and then go from being just interested in it to actually doing something?
Well, so this is the real challenge that we found, and the big learning over the past 3 years is that what I've started to see is that getting someone into a pub for 6 months is what is going to change their lives, not doing sort of necessarily a single bit of training. And so I think that's where we've tried to start kind of blending those two approaches. But really, People Planet Pint is where we see a lot of the action happening, because I think it's the quiet confidence. And like, the action box is great for getting people inspired and getting ideas, but you sort of need the follow on. And that's where, once someone's gone, oh, heat pumps. Okay, well, I sort of know the science of it now. I sort of know that we can do it, but I don't really feel emotionally invested.
Yeah.
But then they might go to their People Planet Pint and speak to someone who's had a heat pump for 2 years, ask them a bunch of questions about it, meet them again in 3 months' time and ask them some more questions. And then that's what's going to take them over the sort of the edge. So I think just doing kind of training and actions in isolation isn't what necessarily is going to work. It needs that community support of people being inspired and hearing personal stories for that action to convert, into reality, rather than it just being an action plan.
Yeah. So from a behavior change perspective, and obviously we Team Jump, we work a lot in behaviors and trying to influence people's habits and shifting behaviors. Would you describe that as it's like the idea of like social normative, so social norming, and people are seeing their peer group are becoming more, because of going along to these events, their peer group is becoming more environmentally aware, and therefore they're kind of taking on some of that understanding, knowledge, traits.
I think there's sort of two things. One, I think, is that it's that social safety that social norming, or whatever the phrase is, kind of brings with that People Planet Pint element to it, where they start to realize that actually they're not the odd one out, that other people are doing this, that there's a network of people who have done it, and that can help make it a lot easier. And it's that sort of status gain. And if you see someone that you like who's got a really expensive car, you're more likely to then want that car. And I think it's that sort of same marketing mechanic as well, of like, well, if you see someone that you really trust doing an action that you want to do, then you're more likely to then sort of do it. I think on the flip side, and this is what went into the action box and the way the facilitation works, is that you never actually give people actions; they pick them themselves.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of like the higher or lower game. Is interesting seeing that and just going, well, you can put 3 cards in front of someone and go, which one of these are you going to do, or which do you think is the lowest or highest? And because they're then involved in the thinking process of going, well, I think that one's right, they then care about that answer. And that's not something they cared about 5 minutes ago. So suddenly you'll have people arguing that paper towels are higher emissions than a hand dryer, and getting really deep into the reason why they think that, on a topic that if you were like presenting that as a slideshow, no one will give a shit. Like, people just wouldn't care about that. So it is sort of the blend of the two, where I think you need that little bit of hands off. Here's some actions. Which are you going to do? Let's make sure that you're thinking through the process here to make that choice.
Yeah.
As well as then reinforcing that with the social side of going, now you've chosen that action, and now you've got that action card that you've taken and gone, do you know what? I'm going to go and look at our waste management. You're then going to go to the pub and speak to people and ask them about waste management and what they've done. And, it sort of ties together in that way. So it's not always as clean as that, obviously. But I do think that People Planet Pint side of, once you meet someone every 3 months at the pub, you're building that relationship, and that is going to lead to a sort of an action more so than a single event thing would do, like training would do.
Yeah. That's fascinating. That's great. So if you're thinking about People Planet Pint as a community, and we all know that building a community can be difficult, and People Planet Pint you've done so well in growing that community so quickly. What's the hardest part of scaling a community like that? And if there's, I'm especially interested, I suppose, in people dialing in who are trying to build a community of green champions themselves, or trying to build a community of volunteers to tackle an issue. What do you think the hardest part is, and how have you tackled it?
Yeah, I'd say it's always, I think there's 2 things really. One is reaching new people. So I think we've got a very decent sized sort of awareness. Well, then it's 1, reaching new people, and 2, getting people to events. And I think this is the challenge, is that we've got a much bigger audience of people who know about us than that we have on our mailing list, for example, who have actually registered for an event. And I think that's the challenge of going, how do we reach them? And some of those people will be people who have just seen it on LinkedIn, who aren't working in sustainability and may not think it's for them. So it's how do we actually get a message that is going to resonate with them and get them to see it 10 times a week so that they then achieve it, but also doing it for free because the events are free to attend. So there's a real challenge there around the sort of marketing of scaling the marketing without spending more money. So we've never invested a penny in sort of paid advertising, which has been a great achievement to get it to where it is. But it's like, well, we're now probably hitting the limits where we need to then go to the next level and go, how do we sort of become that household name type approach of breaking out into that world so that we can then bring normal people into the space? Because I think, we have a lot of very passionate sustainability people who know about it, and they wanted that neutral space to come and exist, which is great, but they've not necessarily, to the point that you were making is how do you get them to bring their colleagues along who aren't in the sustainability team, who aren't in the green team.
Yeah.
And that's what we're working on at the minute, is really that kind of persona of, actually, there's a lot of people who are in organizations who do care about sustainability, but they think they're the only ones. And you might have the sort of token sustainability lead who's the passionate one who they might then go and chat to, but they still feel a little bit isolated, and like maybe that only happens once a month or whatever, or once a quarter. So yeah, it's just trying to reach those people. That's sort of our main next challenge, is how do we
breaking out from the already committed green leaning people. Yeah, absolutely. And then is there one particular moment with your history with People Planet Pint which has really stuck with you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think there's been, I wouldn't say there's been one necessarily. I think it's just been a slow cascade of like the sort of regular opportunities and doors that are opened through it in a way that just nothing else I've ever done has had that. Like Action Box is fantastic and it's been really great, and we know it works, and it has really delivered training and people find it very useful, but it's not necessarily opened the doors to collaboration in the same way that People Planet Pint has. And I think that's what has sort of surprised me, is that the People Planet Pint side is much easier to do collaborations with. I'm trying to think. We've got quite a few in the pipeline at the minute, but none of which I don't think I can actually talk about, which is sort of mysterious, I know, but annoying. But
give us the scoop. Come on, Adam.
there's people that we're sort of working with who are, 2 years ago I would have never dreamed of working with, who are then coming to us and saying, "Can we work with you on People Planet Pint? This looks great."
Amazing. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, great, yes, of course. And I think that's the real regular pinch me moment of just those collaborations happening.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah.
Keep an eye out for announcements in the next few weeks.
Good.
Subscribe for more.
And then for you personally, going on, when you said you attended the Glasgow COP and then became more interested in it, has it changed how you personally think and feel about sustainability?
I mean, yes, but I think that changes every 6 months, to be honest with you. I think like 2 years ago, I was much more almost activist, or like much more hardline in terms of the approach of like, shunning people who I saw that were flying on holiday and like really getting upset by that, and people who weren't going fully vegetarian and stuff, and be like, well, this is such a crisis. Then I realized that was not a healthy space to be mentally, but also not a helpful one. That wasn't a way to actually get more people engaged. And it was the slightly more softly of going, actually just get them to the pub. They will go on that journey themselves, and they will change their behaviors from the conversations they have as they realize that. You can't force that upon people. It's the same thing as Action Box, right? Giving people action versus them thinking of the action they could take, two very different things. And so I think that sort of changed quite a lot. But I do think now, I've always sort of resisted that doubling down on the People Planet Pint and going, oh, that's just a nice thing to have. But it's probably in the past year, having spoken to people and done more interviews and done more sort of research and had more feedback coming through from it, you're going, oh no, this is actually where the change is happening. This is where people are having inspiration, coming to the pub to talk about it, and then that's changing their lives, and they are changing their career. They are leaving their jobs and finding new partnerships through over a period of 18 months or 2 years, and they don't know they're doing it necessarily. So it's really hard for me to extract that, but it's just from going to People Planet Pint events and chatting to people that they then start to put the pieces together and go, well, oh yeah, no, I went to this event 3 years ago, and then we met someone there who we've now hired, who is like, they were, in finance, and they're now working in rewilding. And it's, that's not something you can get captured through a survey, but is a really powerful thing of going, actually, that is where the magic happens. Is I think you just need to get people together regularly over a period of time, and that's where change starts to happen. And sometimes it having no real clear direction or point is the point. Like, you need to have that neutral space where people can take the lead on what they need as much as they can.
Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting point about the measuring the impact. So, that all that stuff is fantastic. Clearly, that space, that community is giving you impact on people's lives, and possibly, from what it sounds like, possibly more than you feel, more than what the formal training or the action box or other online tools you've used before. But quantifying that change and that shift in behavior is difficult, and I think that's something we see time and time again across all sorts of sustainability initiatives. Quite often people want the ROI in carbon, in pounds and pence and kilowatt hours, but actually there's a whole kind of bolt-on of other co-benefits which are having an impact. So if you're an organization, you're more sustainability leaning, you're putting more effort into engaging your staff and bringing your staff with you on your sustainability or net zero challenge, you're actually creating a better, healthier workplace. People are more inclined to stick around, and it helps with retention. It helps with painting a positive picture of the business when you're going for the hiring process. And those things are, like you said, difficult to measure, but really powerful. And quite often, if you're looking at it, triple bottom line, you're looking at, on the black and white on the P&L, you're not accounting for that shift, those things. So I think that's fantastic.
I think it's really difficult where you do just have to trust the process and go, do you know what? Actually, my main job is just get the amount of people that are going to the pub up. Like, just that is the number one metric.
North Star.
Registrations. Just as much we can do to get registrations. To get people in the door. And there might be a secondary metric there of, like, from a marketing point of view, awareness or email signups for people to get alerts to their local meetup, etc. But ultimately, it's kind of that conversion point of going from a passive, oh, I've heard about People Planet Pint, into I've now registered and I've walked into the pub at People Planet Pint. Because once they're in, job done. They'll have a great time. They will convert themselves on whatever they need to do. There's no point trying to track that too much, because that then starts becoming a bit overbearing. And we've never done an impact report. I don't think not in the near term. I don't think I will, because it's not the best use of resources. That resources need to go on getting more people into the pub. That's just plumb everything into that.
That's not a bad job, is it? When your North Star is getting people to the pub.
Exactly. It's a really hard mission to be carrying. It's a hard burden.
Just one last question for you, Adam. It's if anyone's watching this and thinking, I want to do something, I want to join, or I want to start that sustainability journey, or is there one, maybe two actions which they can take this month?
Number one is find your local People Planet Pint and go along to it.
I knew it was going to be that.
It'd be remiss for me to say that's my North Star and then not say it. Please do go along. And ideally, I think really for us, it's sharing it with your friends. So finding a friend people on the precipice or people on the periphery of sustainability. So people who are like on the cusp of joining the bubble of sustainability, but are just on the outside. That's where People Planet Pint is the balancing gateway act to kind of get them from the outside onto the inside. So any friends that you've got who think they are curious about sustainability and they might want to come along, please do send them the link to join. And then also, if you'd like to host your own, we are looking for more hosts all the time. Our next intake is in July, so we've got about a month until the next intake opens. We only open in those intakes for about 7 days, 4 times a year. So once that's closed, we won't open it again until September. So if you're thinking about getting a People Planet Pint started in your local area in this autumn, please do join the July intake, and all of that is available on the website. So if you get small99.co.uk, and then there's under events, you've got People Planet Pint.
Incredible. Great. Good stuff. Well, really appreciate your time. Great chatting to you. Yeah, really interesting stuff. And hopefully, if you've joined us today, some useful insights and some valuable things to take away as well. So yeah, thanks so much for joining, everyone. Thanks so much.